Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Climb, the Confident Leader podcast. I'm your host, Rahul Karan Sharma, where we share stories of leaders from being invisible to influencer. And today we have an amazing guest coming in from Canada. He happens to be an author. His journey spans over 4 decades as a CEO and a senior executive across multiple industries, real estate, telecommunications, technology, manufacturing, to name few. But what truly differentiated him is not the title he had had, but the transformations he had led. He has guided teams through challenging turnarounds, expanded business internationally, and helped leaders discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest, Brad Henderson from Canada. Welcome to our show, Brad. How are you doing today?
Awesome. And thank you so much for that very nice introduction.
Awesome. Great, great. And Brad, I know you have been instrumental in transformation, transforming companies, transforming people. Can you give us a brief background about yourself, your leadership journey, and how you have handled so many great things that you have done so far? Enlighten our audience with giving a background on your leadership and what you do.
Sure. Thank you. I started as a summer student in university at a commercial real estate company in Canada. Initially, I thought it was just going to be a summer job, but I ended up staying. And it was a little bit of a mailroom story. I started as a summer student and ended up running the division that I started with. And it was a wonderful time. And for a long period of time, I had a great opportunity to build an amazing organization. But like many, I got caught up in some corporate politics, ended up being excused from further play, as they say. And that led me to an epiphany, which was I had spent so many years building a career inside of one company. And I realized that a lot of my identity was wrapped up in that one company. And so it really forced me to think of my career as a bit of a contract player, someone whose life was outside of their job, still dedicated to the job, but had different identities and boundaries, if you like. And what that launched was really a career of me getting involved with companies, and particularly companies that wanted some transformation. So during the next 30 years, I had something in the order of 14 different roles in 7 different industries, all of which were situations where I was brought in to help affect some major change within that organization.
Wow, wow. What an amazing journey. I mean, and what that one leadership angle which stopped you from playing made you decide on moving out. So it's again a reminder for all of us that what leaders can do, whether it can go in favor of the organization or it may not be in the favor of the organization.
Yeah,
So,
Rahul, I think there's an important piece there, and that is that happened over 28 years ago.
ah,
And what's increasingly shocking to me is that it's still happening. People are
mm,
still abandoning their identity to a job and to a corporation. And so a part of my book and what I'm wanting to help and share with others is that those journeys don't need to be replicated. There's an opportunity to learn from other people's mistakes.
absolutely. And we will come back on your book, The Consistency Effect, Brad. But before we talk about book, one of the interesting fact that we were discussing during our prep call, you say that consistency is the foundation of confident leadership, and especially in chaos. But in my experience, most leaders, they focus on speed and flexibility during change. So why do you believe consistency is more powerful than reactivity?
That's a great question. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Um, I guess one thing is that I don't see speed and efficiency and consistency being necessarily dichotomous. In other words, they're not entirely conflicting. If a leader is consistent in their approach, in their core values, in the way they communicate with their staff, and in the way that they support their staff, especially in a chaotic change, that can be a calming factor on their organization. If you look at the opposite, if they're as chaotic as the change that is occurring, the staff have a difficult time trying to understand where things are going, and it creates a tremendous amount of concern and lack of confidence in the staff to be able to act under those conditions.
Absolutely. And I think you're bringing up another great point, that the leadership or the team that is managing the change, they need to be very clear and consistent in their approach. And in my experience, most of the time I have observed that there is no one to guide that individual or that group of people who are managing the change. They just get the direction from C-level leadership, make it happen. But they don't get a roadmap. They don't get a clear-cut blueprint on how to manage themselves, because there is no one to manage them. They are doing it on all themselves. So I think a very well point that you are making is those leaders who are making the change or who are part of that change team or change committee, they need to be very much consistent in their action as well as consistent in their values. Great point.
One of the things Harry Kissinger said was leadership is about taking people from where they have been, where they have never been. And think of that journey. It is helping them to go from something that they know and understand and feel comfortable with to a place where they don't know, they don't understand, and don't feel comfortable with. So in that role, the leader has to be that beacon of hope, that confidence coach that says to someone like you, you can do it. This is the way we're going to do. And we don't necessarily know all of the perils along the way, but we will make this journey together.
Absolutely. So another golden nugget that has been dropped by Brad, the leader is the one who is showing people not where they are, but where they could have been. So that's another amazing quote that you shared. Now, you mentioned about confidence coach, and we all talk about confidence. We all talk about confidence in self. Enlighten our audience. What do you mean by confidence coach, and how a leader can become a confidence coach? Can you share with our audience?
Sure. When I was the president of a small tech company, and we ended up selling it to a very large telecommunications company. And my role in that transition was helping people, new people that I was meeting at the telecommunications company, to do things that I thought, or the group thought, were the right things to do. And what I found, and it was quite curious to me at the time, was that people knew what to do. They just didn't do what they knew.
Absolutely.
And the real challenge was around confidence. And it was because in a large organization, the environment is sometimes very toxic, very caustic, and that if you make a mistake, it's a career limiting move. So people stick with the tried, the true, and the trivial because they don't want to have the bosses say to them, that was a mistake, what were you thinking? So in order to break that logjam, at one point in time, I said to them, look, we all think that this is the right thing to do, but I can sense that you're all very, very nervous about making this change. How about we do this? If this works out, you will all take the credit. If it does not work out, I will take the blame. And they looked at me like I had three heads, because this was not typical in the culture that they were working in. At first, they probably didn't believe me, but they came to realize when things didn't go well, that I did step up and I did take responsibility for it. Alternatively, when things went well, then I shared the praise with them lavishly. The transformational change that occurred when they figured out that, notwithstanding my shield, my umbrella to help them in the short term, that they could make greater advances, not only in the company, but in their career by taking these risks and by moving forward. The transformation was fantastic. And the group started performing at a much higher level. Job satisfaction went up, loyalty went up. It was actually quite a remarkable experience for me in that whole situation.
Awesome. Kudos to you and the team. The point that you just made about building the confidence, and many a times I have noticed that when a new task has been given to people, the leader just give them the task. They never bring that psychological safety, telling them that it's okay if things does not go well. It's okay if we fail. And when that does not happen, that's where people take a step back and they don't give their full, they don't come out as a full out. I mean, they just take a step back. So I think for our listeners and leaders, make sure that you are giving that confidence to your people, especially when they're trying out something new, something for the first time. Building that psychological safety is very, very important.
Yeah, and I think if you see your role as a leader, if you see your role as a confidence coach, you see how things can be done differently.
Mm-hmm.
Just recently, Francis Ford Coppola, the writer and the director of The Godfather, right? He was given a Lifetime Achievement Award. And Al Pacino, who played Michael Corleone, got up to give a speech. And one of the things that Al Pacino said is, "Thank you, Francis, for believing in me, Al Pacino,
Mm-hmm.
more than I believed in myself."
Wow.
Because if you know the story about it, the movie studio did not want Al Pacino to have that role. And Francis Ford Coppola had to fight them almost to the point of not having the movie made in order to get him there, because he was absolutely sure that he was going to be fantastic. And history proved him right.
Wow, wow. Again, another reminder that what a belief in you from a leader can do. It can do miracles for you. So amazing. Thank you for sharing that story, Brad. I know you had multiple change in your careers, moving from one industry to another. I'm sure there would have been a situation where you became invisible. You became unseen. Tell us, what were some of the mindset shift you had to do in your own scheme of things that really brought that A game from you, Brad?
One story I can share, again, with the telecommunications company, having sold a comparatively small organization to the telecommunications company, a much, much larger organization.
Mm-hmm.
I was put in charge of a series of different groups and divisions, but none of them were core to the telecommunications revenue streams. They were important, notwithstanding, but they were not core. So as a result, they didn't get necessarily the same degree of visibility from the senior leaders, or the same degree of seriousness from the senior leaders. And part of what that helped me to understand is that in future roles, what I needed to understand was not just what the role was, but how important that role was, how important that group was to the core strategy of the company. Because you can be brilliant and do great work in an area of the company that really doesn't matter, and it is going to be difficult for you to ascend up the corporate ladder.
Mm-hmm. So, were there any specific thing that really made a difference for you? Did you change your working style? Did you change any thought process? What did you do differently?
I think one of the things, and there were many, but one of the things was changing my communication capabilities,
Mm.
because many in the organization had fallen into a pattern of a very similar approach, a bit of death by PowerPoint, and a lot of slides with a lot of text on them.
Yep. Yep.
I transformed my communications to something much more visual. So using unusual or even sometimes humorous pictures to
Mm.
try and capture the audience and the team's imagination and to enthuse them with more energy than just sitting through and suffering through a very mundane PowerPoint presentation. And that became a little bit of a signature for my leadership because
Mm.
people looked forward to the presentations because they knew they were going to be at least interesting, if not entertaining.
When you were sharing this, I have seen multiple corporate decks, and they are all text heavy. They all talking about what their organization does, and very rarely they talk about the impact they can bring to the client. And yes, visuals go a great way. We use visuals in our learning workshops a lot because that's what helps people retain information. I want to piggyback on that consistency aspect. How does consistency help leaders stay grounded when they themselves are facing uncertainty or change fatigue? Because I have seen many a times, specifically in the transformation phase, so much of communication happens and still there is a miscommunication and there is a change fatigue that comes in. So how you think consistency can help?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome question because often as leaders, we're dealing with seemingly contradictory information or contradictory situations, right? It's either this or that. And in a lot of cases, as the emerging expression is, two things can be true at once.
Mm-hmm.
It's never a case of polar opposites. It's always somewhere in the middle. And I
Correct.
think with leaders facing change and stress, it really comes down to consistency can be their rudder.
Mm.
Because if change is happening all around you, or you're the one who's actually taxed with bringing about change, there are certain things that you can make consistent, as we talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
that help people on that journey because ultimately you're taking them from somewhere to somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And your ethics, your core values, and even how you approach things, those things can be consistent and they can create a psychological environment where
Mm-hmm.
people feel not only safe, but they're actually inspired to want to follow you in that journey, right?
Right. Right.
Change fatigue equals decision fatigue.
Mm.
If you have some approaches, some frameworks that you've already gone through and that you feel are appropriate in all, if not most, situations, those processes, procedures, frameworks can become your friend in chaos because you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to sit down with a blank page, an empty PowerPoint deck, and say, okay, how are we going to figure this out? You've already got some frameworks to help you. And if you rely on those things in a consistent fashion, the results will be consistent, or at least that's my experience.
Another golden nugget coming from Brad is change fatigue equals to decision fatigue. So keep in mind, if you are dealing with that change fatigue, it will also hamper your decisions as well. And in my experience, what I notice or what I guide our clients is focusing on mini hurdles. Because what happens when this change management is happening, the communication is not going to the bottom. Communication is just remaining within the middle management, and that's where I believe the challenge happens. So it's very, very important for leaders to stay connected with their ground level team, keep on doing huddles, keep on answering their questions, and focus on not about the change, focus on the impact of the change. Why are we doing? And I think that's where we fail at times. We just talk so much about change, change, change. We very rarely we talk about the why part, why we are doing this, how this will impact them positively and how it will impact the organization. And so leaders focus on those mini hurdles, talk to your team because they will give you some responses that probably you may be unaware of. We don't realize that ground level challenges. So thank you, Brad, for bringing those pointers. You do a lot of consulting for your clients. Uh, what would be your recommendation from the leadership training aspect? When is the right time to groom a leader? And what is your advice for an organization who is working to build their leadership pipeline, working to focus on strengthening their future leadership?
I think you just touched on the $1 million question, because all too often, and unfortunately it's still happening, we take people who are really good at what they do and promote them into leadership roles. And we don't give them training before, during, or after that has happened. And as a result, they're left in many cases to figure out all of those things themselves. To answer your question, when should leadership training start? It should start as soon as you decide that someone should be in a leadership role. And maybe to expand that even a little bit further, is that we can all be leaders even if we are not officially supervisors, managers, or CEOs. Leadership is not exclusively the domain of someone who's managing other people. It's the domain of having influence without authority. It's the domain of having the ability to inspire other people, even if you're not directly responsible for them. But particularly if you're directly responsible for them, leadership is about inspiring other people, helping to get the best out of them. And ultimately, for you as a leader, is to get your absolute enjoyment and reward from seeing other people succeed.
Wow.
A quote recently, which I loved, and it says that you're not truly a leader until your protege's protege is teaching other people to be leaders. So that talks about multiple layers. It's not just you've inspired one other person or many other people to be your leader, but you've created an environment where they are in turn cascading that down to successive levels in the organization.
Your thoughts are just sounding like music to my ears, because it's very, very consistently that we have seen our guests talking about, which is build more people. The success of leader is not in having a title. It's more about influencing others to do their best, to be the better version of themselves. I know you have a powerful book coming this summer, The Consistency Effect. Can you give our audience a sneak peek of what this book is all about and how they can connect with you to dive deeper with your work?
That's awesome. Thank you. After 45 years in executive roles in various corporations, I decided that I wanted to do something different to give back to the next generation of leaders. And that's what really inspired me to want to be a leadership coach. And I thought, as I'm talking about all of these things, maybe I should write them down. And that was the journey to the book. And originally I thought, well, gee, I'm not sure I can get 30 or 40 or 50 pages of things that I think are meaningful. At the end of the day, now the book is over 250 pages, and we're looking to pare it back a bit, which is kind of a fun. It's a better problem to have than the other. But when I'm in the past, I've been asked to describe my history, my experiences. I've always talked about it in terms of singles and doubles. So using a very light baseball metaphor, not a grand slam home run hitter, not somebody who created the next billion-dollar unicorn, but someone who has had what I think is a meaningful and rewarding career, just moving from one place to the other, and looking at it on the basis of getting people on base and getting them home, the singles and doubles player. And so the book has that as a very light metaphor going through it. And I use my history of successes, of humbling losses, of curveballs that have come my way through the career to share the lessons that I've learned, again, from successes as well as failures, and help people to understand that consistency is a very noble core competency to not just acknowledge, but to embrace with an incredible amount of passion. Because all too often, everyone goes, yeah, consistency. Yeah, I mean, that's table stakes. Any executive should understand that. But I think what the real awakening for me was is that there are so many barriers to being consistent that people forget that being consistent is easy to say, easy to understand, but incredibly difficult to undertake on a regular basis. So in the book, I try to champion the fact that producing results year over year in a consistent way is truly hitting it out of the park. And that, to me, is the essence of the consistency effect.
Wow. And I think our listener would also love to see the all your experience that is coming in one book. They don't need to spend hours and hours to know what is going in your mind. Probably that book will really help them to know more about you. So thank you for penning that book down, Brad. Now, before I move on to our next fun segment, rapid fire segment, I wanted our audience to know how they can work with you. So let our audience know how they can reach you, what kind of pain points you help them to remove and make them an amazing leaders.
Yeah, thank you. I do a limited amount of one-on-one coaching, so working with senior executives, first-time CEOs, business owners, and essentially they have a myriad of questions. And the higher you get, the less people that you have to talk to. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that a lot of the times people's coaching and mentoring has been tied up inside of one individual organization. So the good news there is that those people understand the dynamics in the organization. The less good news is that many of them have their own perspective to work with. And as we talked about earlier, if you leave that organization for one reason or the other, you lose that link to that coaching and mentoring. So what I recommend is that you have at least one or many coaches outside of your organization, because they're truly interested in your interests and they're interested in helping you to develop. And that coaching and mentoring will last a lifetime as opposed to the duration of your time at an organization. And so finally, what are the kinds of things that I can help with? Definitely people issues, because almost every organization that I've worked with, the biggest challenge has always been people issues, getting the right people to do the right things at the right time for all of the right reasons.
Absolutely.
That continues to be a challenge for most leaders.
I'm not saying that challenge will go away. That will grow as we have multi-generational coming into the workforce. How you deal with the new generation, how you deal with people from different countries, different cultures. That is all about people issues.
Absolutely.
All right, so our rapid fire question, there will be 5 questions coming your way, Brad. We don't want you to think too much. Just respond as the question come to you. You have already shared a quote earlier, so I will not go with that. But tell us, what is one routine that you don't miss on a daily basis?
I guess the one that I stick with every morning is going through Flipboard, which is a news feed. And I've set it up to have quite an eclectic feed of information to me so that I can keep current on a variety of different topics, not just keep looking at the things that interest me. So forcing myself to expand beyond the core interests that I have. And what that does is that it opens me up to views from psychologists or views from influencers or views from technologists, not just views from leaders.
What's one leadership skill you wish someone had taught you earlier?
Wow, there's lots of them. Let me see if I can just pick one.
I'm sure.
Um, I think, I think, I think the Socratic method. So the ability to ask and not tell.
Hmm.
Because as a junior leader, I was much more involved in telling people what to do. And it wasn't until I really learned the power of questions that I
Hmm.
learned that a much more powerful way to lead people is by using your questions to try and help them on their own journey,
Wow.
to help them come to the realizations that you perhaps have already come to.
I think that's one of the quality of a good coach, questioning skills. So thank you, Brad, for bringing that up. The next one is, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Oh, definitely a morning person.
Okay. All right. If your career were a Netflix series, what would be the title of season one be?
um, well, I guess carrying on with the baseball metaphor, it would be strike out and step up.
Wow. Strike out and step up. Amazing. I'm sure it will be a blockbuster, my friend. Uh, Last one, indoors or outdoors for your leadership, ideal leadership retreat?
Um, well, I think outdoors is a better choice because it is such a polar opposite to what people are dealing with on a daily basis. They're always in their offices, in meeting rooms and boardrooms, and being outside is such an expansive experience and can help people to think differently. Now, I think the caveat is because I live in Canada that you wouldn't want to do that in the winter.
Well, thank you, Brad, for opening up, and I'm sure our listeners will love to know that brighter side of your journey. We are on the end of our episode. Before I let you go, any final words of wisdom from you for our aspiring leaders who are currently working as individual contributors, want to become leaders?
So first of all, thank you very much for having me on your show. I think it's awesome. You're an awesome interviewer.
Thank
So
you.
well done. I think, if there's a final note for emerging leaders, people that are on a fast track, it's recognizing that it's a journey and that there's always going to be further hills to climb.
Mhm.
And along the way, you need to understand that there needs to be celebration. There needs to be a recognition that you've achieved a certain number of goals within your broader goal. Because if you just keep moving the goalposts every time you've achieved something and you don't give yourself that sense of satisfaction, you'll always be putting off your happiness until
Mhm.
some future goal occurs. And if that's the way you set it up, that future goal will never happen and you won't necessarily achieve the happiness you might be looking for.
Mm. A very interesting point you're bringing up, that be consistent in achieving that goal and then increase the goal instead of increasing every time you're achieving it. Great. Well, so for me, I will just, I have few learnings from this episode, Brad. So I will share my learnings in focusing on those leaders who are undergoing transformation, any changes that is happening in their organization. So this would be primarily for them. Number one is core value. Be consistent with your core value and core message during the chaos that is there around change. So focus on being consistent with your core values, core action. Number two is be a confident coach. Be a person who is giving that self belief on your team members that yes, you can do it. It's possible. Create that psychological safety around them so that they are not afraid of failure. So that is the number two. And number three is change fatigue is equal to decision fatigue. So if you are undergoing the change fatigue, be mindful that the decision that you will be taking at those times could also impact the overall process. So I'm sure there were many other golden nuggets that were dropped throughout the episode, Brad, but these were the things that I thought I'll share with our audience. Once again, it was a pleasure speaking with you. We wish you good luck. I hope consistency effect hits all the roof, all the charts, and I'm sure our listeners will be purchasing it as soon as it is out. Thank you again. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Rahul.